Hi, Miss Stewart.
Hello.
I hope everybody's had a great day. It is 3:15. We're going to try to give people time to come in, but this is a jam-packed session. So we are going to welcome everybody to For the Sake of Argument. So hopefully people will trickle in. We're looking for about maybe 10 or 11 more people. But if not, we're going to get rolling because we need every minute of our time. We hope you guys had a great day today at school. And I commend you for coming back to recap and relearn these particular standards. So, welcome to For the Sake of Argument. We are in, this will be a two-part PD, and it will build throughout the next 2 days. Okay, so our objectives today, we're going to look at identifying claims and their validity. Another component of this is evaluating slant and bias in text. And lastly, we're going to look at evaluating logic and reasoning. So the first half will cover what you see in yellow, identifying claims, and evaluating logic and reasoning. Now, I know that when we teach this particular standard, from what I've seen from a global perspective, teachers do a good job of having the students identify claims, but hopefully what you will get today is a little more in depth. And I know for in fact that tomorrow we will really delve into the complexities of this particular standard. So when we are looking at the middle school standards, one way to kind of understand the standards is to be sure that you go in and you identify the vocabulary that is relevant to the students understanding what they're being asked to do. So in this, you'll see words like trace and evaluate, which we consider to be testing and thinking vocabulary, but you also see argument and claims. Those are your academic vocabulary. Okay. Distinguishing is also technical testing vocabulary that students need to understand. So when we went through the standard, and this is the same process you would do with any standard within your PLC. You go through the standard, you identify what is the vocabulary, and then you also identify what are the verbs. The verbs are what the students will be doing. Okay, so if you want to make sure that you are teaching on grade level and the standard correctly, when it says trace and evaluate, your activity in your lesson plan should have the students tracing and evaluating. When it says distinguish, your activity in your classroom should have the students distinguishing. Okay. And just to take it one step further, you look at the nouns. So the nouns are what the students are going to be doing with the action verbs. So they are tracing and evaluating what? Arguments. They are distinguishing what? Claims that are supported versus claims that are not. So when you take a minute and look at standards for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, do you see a difference? You can respond in the chat or you can unmute yourself. What difference do you see from 6th through 8th grade? If I'm a 6th grade teacher, what am I doing that's different from an 8th grade teacher?
Students are assessing instead of distinguishing. Mr. Moore put that in the chat.
Okay, good. So we see the idea that students are assessing. So when we're talking about assessing, students have to really kind of look at the logic and the reasoning that is there. And the distinguishing is they are just picking out, are there facts there or are there no facts present within that particular argument? Thank you, Mr. Moore. Okay. All right. So the standards are not the same. All right. So let's take a minute and look at high school.
So with the high school standards, you'll see our bands coming along here. We sort of did the same thing, the verbs in yellow. So again, at the high school level, ninth and 10th grade, we've got those students delineating, evaluating, assessing, identifying. And we did sort of the same thing here as well with our nouns and phrases, thinking about what are our students actually doing with those verbs. So they're in ninth and 10th grade, making sure that their reasoning is valid. So they're talking about the validity, they're looking at relevant evidence. And here in ninth and 10th grade, we even start getting into identifying false statements and fallacious reasoning. So we start talking about fallacies in ninth and 10th grade. Now, when we get to the 11th and 12th grade band, um, if you look at this standard, we've got a whole different process going on here a little bit because we're beyond identifying claims and we're beyond just looking at the argument itself. In 11th and 12th grade, our students should be evaluating the reasoning in US or British text. And here we get into premises, purposes, and arguments just in works of public advocacy. So, as you are thinking about these standards, first of all, just the 9, 10, and 11 and 12, what do you notice? What big things kind of stand out to you between the difference between these two standards? And again, feel free to unmute yourselves and just talk out with us, or you can put it in the chat if you can't do that. So first question, just what do you see that's kind of different between these two standards, even though they're so closely related in grade level? And with that same thought in mind, we're also going to look at the progression there, but our hope is that you see beyond 10th grade, we're not even looking at just what is the claim anymore. And Ms. Brown put in 11th grade looks at the purpose more, which is exactly it. By the time they get to be juniors and seniors, you want your students to be able to evaluate the purpose of the arguments and why they're doing it, especially with that whole phrase about using works of public advocacy. So they're taking it a step further. They're not just looking right here in the text. Yeah. So we created this little graphic here just to kind of show you how what happens in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is what builds the solid foundation for a successful high school student when they're doing argument in their ELA classes. So you can see in every single one, except for that very top one, we're identifying claims. And if we're doing a good job of that in middle school, then when they get to high school, that's a very easy process for them as far as moving up to actually looking at that purpose and figuring out the reasoning behind the argument. So looking at just this graphic, what are the major differences and how do you see these standards building from 6th through 12th grade? What are some things that you notice or can take away from this graphic? And again, feel free to unmute yourselves. They don't want to unmute, Kim. So Ms. Brinkley says the language from irrelevant to fallacious in eighth grade versus ninth and 10th grade. So yes, definitely a huge language difference. What else are you seeing? Any big ahas about your teaching thus far? Anything that you can already sort of take away looking at this graph? 6th grade is concerned with being able to find the textual evidence. And I think that is such a huge point because that's our basis and that's our foundation. Those kids need to be able to find that textual evidence so that they can eventually do more things with the textual evidence, looking at assessing it, its validity and all that. And we'll get to that soon. But yeah, so we hope that through this, you can see your middle school is really laying that foundation for how students can understand their ninth and 10th grade and then 11th and 12th grade standards. This new says scaffolding over time, including the vocabulary and the terminology used. So yes, that is very important.
And just to speak to that point, it is important that we see this from a 6-12 lens, because middle school and high school have to work very closely together, or this house, is how I see it, kind of falls down. If they don't get it in 6th grade, that house starts leaning. When we are looking at the foundation of building solid arguments and students understanding solid arguments. All right, so let's dive into planning and teaching the standard. So when we talk about identifying claim, how do you explain claim to your students? Okay, because anytime you're introducing vocabulary to your students, you want to make sure that you first define it for them, so there's no misunderstanding about what it is. So I'm in your class, I'm your student. How do you define claim?
It's brown.
Yep. So what do we, obviously we've been teaching this because I see all of my teachers are experienced. What do you say? Okay, we say it's a piece of an argument. Absolutely. That is one element of a claim. I usually tell mine that the claim is what the author believes to be true at the basic level. That's right, Ms. Smooth. A claim is an idea purported by, I love that standard vocabulary, and it's the author's position. It's an argument stating a position. Okay, good. So thank you for sharing your idea of what a claim is. All of them are right in their own right, but we want to make sure that 612, that we actually have a firm understanding of what the claim is, because if not, that foundation falls flat. Okay, so when we're teaching claim to students, we have to make sure that they understand that a claim is a statement or an assertion that something is the case. And usually it doesn't have evidence, proof or evidence, typically. So some people can make a claim about something, but then they have to kind of go back in and support it. Another way to look at it is a claim is a statement that the person who is making it believes to be true. Okay. Whether it is true or not is not the case. Okay. So once we define claim for the students, we tell them to go in and identify a claim. We practice at the most basic level. Now you know what it is. Can you identify it? And then if you are going to marry, which a lot of teachers do, writing an argument with teaching an argument, you want to make sure that you do it piece by piece. So once I teach students what a claim is and teach them how to identify claim, now I can use that text as a mentor text for them to write their own claim. Okay, so that's a great way to kind of set up the writing with the reading piece. Okay, so now we're getting ready to move into breakouts. And when you get into your breakouts, this is what you're going to have to do. I want you to assign roles. Somebody in the group is going to be the reader. The reader is responsible for reading the article aloud to the group. Someone is going to be the interjector. And that person, as the reader is reading, will stop and say pause if they see a claim. And then you have a person who will be the annotator. And that person, once the interjector says pause, the annotator will highlight the claim that the group identifies in yellow. There will be multiple claims within this argument. This is a student paper, a student opinion paper, okay? Are there any questions on what I'm asking you to do before we move to breakouts? All right, you should be heading to your breakouts in just a minute. Be sure that you look at your group number matches your group slide on your PowerPoint. So be sure you're working in the correct section of your PowerPoint.
I dropped the link to the PowerPoint in the chat. So you should all be able to pick that up.
Yes, so if you look in the chat and click your presentation, be sure that you can access it. And if you can access it, just type "got it" in the chat bar so I know we can move on. Click on the link in the chat bar, and if you have it, type "got it" so we know we can jump into our breakouts.
I think we've got everybody back now. Yep. All right, Miss Lucas, we're good. You're muted.
Hey, I was just talking up a storm. Okay.
See you.
I know it's frustrating when you are in your breakout groups and you don't have time to finish, but we just want you to be able to have a little bit of practice with finding the claim. So did you run into any hiccups when you were going through this activity? Any confusion that you might have had?
Yes, ma'am. I know with our group, with group one, we got stumped on the title because it seemed like the title was the actual claim of the article, and then the smaller ones may have been like the reason. So we were getting confused about that part.
Yes, ma'am. And that's a very good point. But I will tell you, your group was right. So we start looking at the overarching claim and then how sometimes our reasons can overlap into smaller claims. So I do know some groups did have that type of conversation. Um, just to be sure that we have clarity, you remember that your claim is always going to be a statement or assertion of something. Now, it can or cannot have evidence, but it's always a statement that is an assertion of truth. Okay. All right. So keeping that in mind, we move into once the students identify claim and they practice going in and identifying claims, then you define evaluating for them. So anytime you see the word evaluating in your standards, I want you to realize that you have to have some type of criteria. Your students have to have some type of criteria because when you are evaluating, you are judging something and you are determining the significance of something, the worth or the quality of something. In this case, we are determining the quality of an argument, and our students need to be able to understand that. Okay, so in your PLC, you could work together to determine the criteria of what makes a claim valid. Okay, or what are the components of a claim? So you work together to create a rubric that the students can use because it's going to be very hard when you tell the students, I need you to evaluate this claim. They're going to look at you like you're crazy. They're going to sit there and not do anything until you walk back around to their desk. So you want to put something in their hands that makes it easy for them to be able to evaluate. And through conversation and reflecting, Lane and I came up with these pieces of criteria. Okay, so a claim is something that is supported with facts. A good claim, correction, is something that is supported with facts and evidence. A good claim is logical. It follows the rules of formal logic. There is a clear correlation. It is informed beyond just personal opinion, and it is framed in context. So when a student is evaluating a claim, you would have them go in and plug in the claims that are there, which we'll look at in a minute, the claims that you just identified, and then you do a checkbox. Does it have facts to support it? Is it logical? Is it informed? So that way they can really judge the quality of this claim that is being made. And then lastly, they evaluate. Okay. All right. So the next step, after you introduce that rubric to them, you wouldn't necessarily have them go ahead and complete it, simply because it just makes sense for them to go back and be able to find the reason and the evidence before they evaluate the claim. So again, first step, we move into reason. We define what a reason is. So a reason is a cause or an explanation or a justification for a belief. Now, my reason does not have to be rooted in fact, but it can be an explanation. I can believe something and I might not have a fact to back it up, but it explains why I believe what I believe. It explains that statement. It serves as a mini claim, which speaks to what Ms. Biggs just talked about. We were getting confused because it seems like the reasons could also be claims. And so when you're teaching this, it makes sense to explain to the students that you can have a big claim or an overarching claim, which is what you see in this article, but there are also reasons that serve as like your mini claims. And your mini claims are going to be like your personal whys. Let's just keep that, tuck that somewhere so you can remember that. So when you're locating reason, you're identifying what are some of the personal reasons why they believe that. I may or may not have facts to back it up, but it is an explanation of why I believe that claim. Then you have evidence. Evidence is going to be proof. Okay. Evidence is facts or knowledge of the facts. So when we're talking about strong evidence, we want the students to be able to go in and identify, well, it said 18% did XYZ. That's evidence. We can go back and hunt that down. If it says in the article that a giraffe was killed, that is knowledge of the fact, because I can go back and determine whether that is true or not. Okay, so you have reasons and you have evidence. Holding that into account, you're going to go back into your breakouts. You're going to go into your article, and I want you to kind of go through like the first 1 or 2 pages. I think that's what everybody was able to get through. Your 1 or 2 pages. I want you to look at the claims. Now I want you to go in and identify what are the reasons. The reasons that they give, I want you to highlight in green. What are the evidence, pieces of evidence that you see? I want you to highlight them in pink. Evidence is pink, reason is green. Now remember that I told you that some of your claims that you highlighted in yellow might also be mini claims. So they might be your reasons. So if something is already highlighted yellow, you can underline it, okay? But we're marking reason green, evidence pink. Any questions? All righty. You should be heading back to your breakout rooms.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I think we've got everybody now. You muted again, Miss Lucas.
It's not my turn to talk.
I know. I was waiting for you to share your screen. Okay, so as I was popping in and out of the breakout rooms, one thing that I noticed is that as ELA teachers, 6th through 12th grade, we had some questions and some pretty good conversations about, is this a claim? Is this a reason? Is this evidence? And we all have degrees in this subject area. So if we have to take some time to really break down what these words mean and what we're looking for, imagine our poor little pitiful little baby students. They are going to have a lot more trouble, taking apart these arguments, especially if they don't go into their analyzing with clear definitions of what they're looking for. So that's why we kind of started you with exactly what everything was, gave you that academic definition, and then asked you to do that. And we still had some good conversations about, is this good? Is this not good? And we're going to talk about that some more. But as we start assessing this reason, really just the reason, those many claims, that's the cause, that's the explanation. So part of our standards asks us to assess that reason. So some of the questions that we might ask ourselves when we're assessing reason is, do the reasons support the overarching argument? So on your, and a couple of groups already started working on this, but when you start working on your slide to sort of break down the argument, those top three reasons, are they good? Do they make sense at first glance when you look at them to support that big argument of the whole article? So just assessing your reasons, trying to figure out if they actually make sense when you first look at them. As you were going through the breakouts, did you have any big takeaways from that? I know I had the takeaway myself that we were all kind of struggling with different parts of this. Did you guys have any big takeaways?
I saw that they're really gonna have to be able to use critical thinking skills to work through the pieces of evidence.
Yes, definitely. Because when you start trying to take apart that reason from that evidence, it gets kind of murky. So yes, they're definitely going to have to draw on their critical thinking skills in order to do that. Any other takeaways? Thank you, Ms. Daniels. Any other takeaways?
I think that having a criteria or a rubric,
Mm-hmm.
so they'll know, okay, this is what a claim looks like, this is what a reason looks like, or this is, ask yourself this, to be able to identify those different parts of the argument will be very helpful.
Yep, I think so too. And that's why, that's how we started. So by showing this text and starting with exactly what we're expecting, that can make it easier for our students. Okay. Any other thoughts about this before we let you go one more time?
Kind of piggyback on what Ms. Brown said, I think you would really have to model this whole class before you could turn them loose to work on it like by themselves or with a partner.
Yes, absolutely. And that's something that we're going to talk about because like Kim was saying, we want you to get just a little piece of it. But if we were teaching this in class, we would be taking these paragraphs apart bit by bit. We would really be breaking this down for our students. So yes, that is very, very important for our kids. Okay, so we are going to put you in breakouts one last time. And some of the groups I saw were overachievers and they already started working into this organizer. So you're going to basically take all that stuff that you have been highlighting and now we're going to stick it into an organizer. And we're going to think about what is that big claim? What's the overarching argument in this whole article? And then in the small square boxes, that's where we're going to break down those mini claims, those reasons for that author. Then in our yellow boxes, that's where you're going to insert your pink evidence that you highlighted. Okay. Do you want to go ahead and show them the next slide too?
Yes, I do want to mention here also that if there is not enough evidence that directly supports that claim, that it's okay that all boxes aren't filled in.
Yes, thank you. Someone did ask that, and yes, definitely that's okay. The other thing that you're going to do in this last breakout is our second thing. This is where we gave you that criteria for how to evaluate a claim. So as you are working on those claims and those reasons in your organizer with your group, complete this rubric to evaluate. And I know time we're crunched a little bit, but at least take one of your claims and go through these criteria so that you can see, is my claim solid or is my claim here kind of weak? Now I did have a question. What if we have more mini claims than the boxes allow? For time's sake, just put, what you can. Now, when you do this in your own classrooms, you can make this organizer work however you need it to work for your article that you've chosen. Any questions about what you're doing this last round in your groups?
And we need supersonic speed when you get in your groups.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna put you in there and you guys go for it. everyone. Welcome back. And I hope you had a chance to at least kind of get through some of those reasons and your evidence there, and just kind of thinking through that. I see not a lot of groups had a chance to get to evaluating their claims, but that's okay. You were able to really break down those evidences there. So just kind of overall looking at this, at your organizer and then ours, I think Miss Lucas is going to pop ours up right here. Hopefully yours looks very similar to this. And again, we had some good conversations about, is this evidence? Is this a reason? But for the most part, what we want you to be able to do is look at the things in those small white boxes, and do they seem to connect to the big claim? So that's your first kind of test of the validity of those claims. Do they connect? Now, in our next session tomorrow, that's when we're really going to dive into those pieces of evidence and really thinking about the supporting details and how relevant they are, how sufficient they are, and how much they actually do support that claim. But hopefully you had a chance to go through and use the rubric to take apart those claims. So just to review, today we talked about identifying claims, and we talked about how to evaluate the logic and the reason. So because this is a two-part session, you will have to complete a survey for today and for tomorrow. So please don't forget your survey. Tomorrow in our session, we're going to look at just assessing that validity and then talking more about slant and bias that we see in the articles and how that plays a role in that validity. So please don't forget to do your survey. And last but not least, I'm going to drop a link to a Google Jamboard, and we just want you to go to this Jamboard and answer these questions. Dropping the link right now. So when you get on this Jamboard, you're going to look at, first of all, what's your biggest takeaway in regards to the progression of this standard? And then if you click the second slide, which part of this session do you feel will have the greatest impact on your teaching practice? And this is how we're going to end today. So if you'll just pop up some sticky notes with your thoughts for this session, and we'll kind of look at those before we end our day today. Is it letting y'all type on it? Yeah, okay, good.
Okay, good. And we do know, guys, we understand that an hour is a very short time. Miss Lane and I talked about how we need a full day session to really be able to do this, but because of COVID, we can't get together and we can't do it during the day. So we thank you for your patience.
I like that start small. It's really important to, break this down, and we've got break apart the standards and then clarify the terms. That's really important. Take it little by little. Yes, absolutely. Very important things here. Model.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely start whole class. Yes, that I love that point, and I think it's good for us to make sure we're going back over that with the whole class. Don't just give the students an article and say do it. We really got to clarify those things.
My biggest takeaway was seeing the progression between middle grades and high school.
Good. Then on that next slide, Kim, if you'll click that to that number 2 up at the top. And then we're looking at which part of the session will have the greatest impact. I'm glad y'all like the organizer.
All righty. It's 4:16.
Okay, guys, thank you. Please do the survey, and we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. You guys have a great rest of your afternoon. We appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.